I'd like to invite Excellency Minister Shri Bhupender Yadav, the Minister from India. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Her Excellency, Dr. Siti Nurbaya Bakar, Honorable Minister of Environment and Forestry, Republic of Indonesia, Excellencies and distinguished delegates from G20 countries, guest countries, international agencies, my dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Her Excellency Dr. Siti Nurbaya Bakar for organizing this G20 joint ministerial at Bali. It was here in 2007 that the world adopted the Bali Action Plan, which emphasized that climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction agendas are closely linked. Therefore, apart from doing everything we can to cut emissions and slow the pace of global warming, we must also adapt to climate consequences so we can protect ourselves and our communities. Excellencies, the world is going through multiple crises with rising energy bills, increasing food insecurity, capital flight from developing countries, and a pandemic that continues to push back years of progress in sustainable development. Alongside this ongoing crisis are the growing threats of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land and ocean pollution. These environmental stresses impose additional burdens on the poorest and most vulnerable who have done little to create global environmental problems and whose development aspirations remain unfulfilled. As our overall objective, we must seek a trinity of jobs, growth, and sustainability embedded in equity and justice. There is an urgent need to mobilize resources to stimulate the economy in a manner that makes it more resilient and sustainable. But the current pace and scale of climate finance from developed countries is not matching the global aspiration to combat climate change. Collectively, work is needed toward turning ambition into action in accordance with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Excellencies, India is totally committed to driving its low-carbon industry transition through a multi-pronged approach that cuts across sectors and issues. The low-carbon development strategy, as enunciated in the Panchamrit, the 5 nectars, is an important reflection of our strong commitment towards sustainable development. The most recent Indian financial budget clearly highlights the need for transition and climate action. So the industry front, the budget specifically mentioned 4 pilot projects for coal gasification and conversion of coal into chemicals required for industry. In order to mobilize resources for green infrastructure, sovereign green bonds will also be issued as a part of the government's financial market approach. India has progressively reduced and rationalized subsidies through elimination of major transport fuel subsidies for better targeting, such as through providing subsidies on renewable sources of energy and concessional tax rates. India also has a range of mechanisms, including the coal cess introduced in 2010, perform, achieve, and trade to reduce energy consumption in energy-intensive industries, and renewable energy certificate scheme to promote generation of renewable energy. Most recently, India's lower house of parliament has passed a legislation to establish a domestic carbon credit market. In addition, India has recognized that circular economy approaches are key for achieving environmentally sound waste management and is working tirelessly to bring circularity and resource efficiency in 11 waste streams with the preparation of action plans. Excellencies, globally, in order to effectively combat climate change, we must first recognize that development and environment conservation need to be aligned rather than treated exclusive of each other. Secondly, we must decouple economic growth from greenhouse gas emissions while considering national circumstances and principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. In this regard, Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi launched a global initiative, Lifestyle for Environment, Life Movement at COP26 in Glasgow, to promote an environment-conscious lifestyle that focuses on mindful and deliberate utilization instead of mindless and destructive consumption of resources. India's enhanced nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement include life in their ambition to propagate healthy and sustainable lifestyles based on traditions and values of conservation, moderation and climate justice, and to protect the poor and the vulnerable from the adverse impact of climate change. Economies at large must inculcate resource efficiency and circularity while considering national circumstances and capabilities to achieve our environmental, climate and development peregrines. Excellencies, all across the world, people are facing a spate of new and challenging environmental problems every day. Conservation and restoration of ecosystem and vulnerable biota become increasingly important to balance food security, human development, vital ecosystem services, and sustain livelihoods. While India has witnessed large-scale economic development in the last few decades, we have remained conscious of our environmental heritage. India is one of the world's mega biodiversity regions with over 8% of the world's species diversity. In the last decade, India has increased its forest cover and restored its wildlife through effective protection, monitoring and management of protected areas. Our effort for halting and reserving soil degradation were also recognized at the UNCCD COP15 earlier this year. India has also notified new rules to and management of wetlands, including peatlands. But we must all do more. The world needs greater global collective action to halt and recover biodiversity loss and promote sustainable land management measures. At least 23% of global land area is no longer productive for agriculture use, and 75% land has transformed from its natural state. This is directly affecting at least half of the humanity and threatening half the global GDP, or about USD 44 trillion. Therefore, I welcome our collective decision to reduce degraded land by 50% by 2040 and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. For this, continued support is needed for the G20 global initiative for reducing land degradation and enhancing conservation of territorial habitat. I also welcome effort to conserve, restore, and ensure sustainable use of water-dependent ecosystem. We must develop the legal and governance framework to ensure integrated water resource management. The G20 member must hold a special responsibility toward the ocean. Given that we are all coastal countries, we are cumulatively responsible for 45% of the world's coastline and over 21% of the exclusive economic zones. India supports science-based climate action on the most vulnerable coastal areas and ecosystem, and recognize the importance of improving ocean data collection to build resilience in line with the UN Decade of Ocean Science and Sustainable Development. India, with its Earth observation satellites launched by the Indian Space Research Organization, has focused on collecting ocean data to develop optimal coastal zone management plans using state-derived input for improved coastal land use, vital coastal habitat, and monitor the ecological status of all marine protected areas. Today, India has one of the largest coastlines of remote sensing satellite in operations. The ocean also holds vast natural capital estimated of USD 24 trillion. Exploring this immense opportunity must include sustainability practices that enhance rather than degrade the marine environment and provide new growth opportunities rather than disrupt the lives and livelihood of millions of dependent on marine resources. Once again, the need for financial resources, both public and private, to deliver on these ambitious is paramount. Excellencies, the primary responsibility for the transition toward net zero emission rests with those who have historically accounted for most accumulated greenhouse gas concentration. Ladies and gentlemen, my travel to some African and developed countries alongside in the recent past have further sensitized me to the fact that maximum impact of the climate crisis is being borne by the poorest countries and most vulnerable communities, which have contributed the least to the climate crisis, and lack of technology and capacity and finance required to significantly alter the status quo. However, the promise of climate finance remains a mirage. An added problem is the clubbing of development finance with climate finance. In 2019, 70% of public climate finance was given out as loan instead of grant. In 2019-20, only 6% of climate finance was in grants. This is pushing developing countries into more debt. Developing countries face an estimated gap of $1 trillion in COVID-19 spending. While India has not been a traditional contributor of global emissions, we are showing the intent in our action to be a problem solver. India has made remarkable progress in recent years in electrifying all households and rapidly increasing access to clean cooking energy. It is also one of the world's largest market for deployment of renewable energy. India's national green hydrogen mission promises to be a game changer for reducing emission from hard to abate sectors. All these efforts need investment at lower costs and innovative models for scaling up climate finance to double 2019 level by 2025. Now approaches are also needed to develop and deploy low carbon technologies. To conclude, I would like to emphasize that we must move beyond climate talk to climate action. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Unless we address the various issues prudently and seriously, we are surely doomed for disaster. I would like to end with the old Sanskrit language of Indian Sanskrit language, shloka, which encompasses our vision for a healthy world and peaceful life. Now I read in Sanskrit, Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarva Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukh Bhag Bhavet, Om Shanti Shanti. That means, may all sentient beings to be at peace, may no one suffer from illness, may all see what is auspicious, may no one suffer. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you to all.